Are you thinking about moving to Toronto? Well, hold up. You will want to watch this video first. There are a lot of great reasons why someone would move to Toronto, but it's not all positive. There are some negatives that you want to consider depending on where you are coming from. This actually might be a culture shock to you, so that way you are well prepared. Let's get straight into it. Number one is going to be the cost of living, which is high in Toronto. Toronto is the second most expensive city in Canada after Vancouver. I have a video called The Cost of Living in Toronto, which has the breakdown of the expenses in this video. So if you want to check it out, look right over here. But I also wanted to give you guys the most recent numbers when it comes to real estate in 2024. So the average single home in Toronto is just over 1.2 million. And as you can see in Vancouver, it's just over 1.9 million. So there definitely is a difference, and it isn't the most expensive city. However, it is still expensive. When it comes to renting a one-bedroom unit in Toronto, it's going to cost you about $2,239 a month. In Vancouver, it's going to cost you $2,726 a month. Now, the property taxes is higher in Toronto compared to Vancouver. However, Toronto ranks in the middle when you compare it to other cities in Canada. So it's definitely not the highest in Canada at all. It's actually the middle range. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's take a look at this chart right here, which is going to show the cost of living comparing all the cities in Canada. This study looks at the cost of living in all the provinces in Canada, and it's going to look at 55 contributing factors based on the data found from the Canadian Real Estate Association and Stats Canada. These factors were divided into 7 categories and given a score from 1 to 10. These include income, property prices, food, bills, rent, health and personal care, and transportation. The scores were weighted and indexed to give you a final score out of 100. Due to affordability issues and the increase of homelessness in Toronto, rooming houses is now legal in Toronto, so the average rent is going to cost you about $750 a month, depending on the home and the location. This allows rent to be more affordable for single people who are living in the city, so that's something that you want to consider as well. Negative number 2 is construction. From ongoing public transit development to replacing century-old water mains, Toronto is filled with construction projects all the time. The city is considered to be the busiest when it comes to North America and it comes to construction. Last year, Toronto had $1.14 billion of infrastructure work planned for roads, bridges, TTC tracks, sewers, and water mains. And because there is a lot of construction happening in the city, this is going to mean that there's going to be some construction noise. Now, the good thing is the Toronto noise bylaw allows construction activity during the daytime alone. Construction may take place between 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday. However, activities are forbidden to take place on weekends and on holidays, which is definitely a plus when it comes to the noise. Which brings us to number 3, which is traffic. Construction does make the city streets more congested. Toronto has topped the list of the most congested cities in North America, beating out cities like New York and Mexico City, according to new traffic data. These new bike lanes in Toronto don't help the situation either, causing more traffic for the city, which was their attempt to get more people on bikes, which in my opinion is not working. First of all, the winters are super long and no one wants to be biking in the winter time. And I personally believe that most people prefer to drive and they're not going to change that just because of the bike lanes. Now, when it comes to traffic, it really isn't that bad all the time. You need to know when are, traffic hours, rush hour, things of that nature. So a little local hack for you guys is knowing the hours. What do I mean by that? I'm going to give you guys an example. So let's say you have to go to work. You usually leave at 8 a.m. But if you were to leave the house just a half an hour earlier, you would actually skip the traffic and you didn't have to worry about being late. You don't have to worry about the traffic and all of that craziness. All you have to do is go 30 minutes earlier. You're going to skip all of the traffic. You get to work early. And then of course, just checking your GPS to see which streets are the busiest and which streets you want to avoid, things of that nature. Good thing is here, guys, that it isn't all the time. You just have to know what are the best hours to drive and what hours you should be avoiding traffic. Now, when it comes to the highways, we have Highway 401. This is one of the busiest in North America, and that's because we only have one major highway that runs from west to east in Toronto, versus example like LA, where they have multiple highways going from west to east. The the highway system can definitely be improved to help the traffic situation in Toronto, just my opinion. Negative number 3 is going to be the increase in violence. So Toronto has become a very popular city and there are a ton of people moving here all the time. An increase in population usually does mean that there's going to be an increase in violence. And that is exactly what I've been noticing here in the last couple of years. Toronto police data show that in 2024 alone, there's been an increase in 140% when it comes to shootings compared to the same time last year in 2023. Violence was improving in 2023 based off of the stats compared to the previous years. However, 2024 is not looking too good. What a lot of people are concerned about is the attacks that are happening more commonly in the TTC, in the subway stations, something that I never had to worry about growing up. I use the subway all the time. I don't anymore because I don't need to, but in the past, like I even went to school and I had to use the subway, things of that nature, and no one was ever concerned. But that's because we never had those random attacks in the past, whereas you start to hear more about them now. That's when it comes to the violence in Toronto. Yes, of course, there's more people here, so there's going to mean more violence. But if you really look at the grand scheme of things, Toronto isn't that bad when you compare it to other cities, especially other cities even within Canada, right? So if you look at the list, you'll notice that compared to other cities in Ontario or even in Canada, just wanted to explain this chart a little bit better to you guys. This is the list of all the cities in Canada, and this is based off of violence. So these are actually the most dangerous cities to live in order. And as you can see, Toronto did not make the top of the list. When I try to find where Toronto landed, it actually ended up being the safest city in Canada, according to the study that I found online. So as you guys can see, it's still a very safe city. But overall, there has been a change in the last couple of years because of the increase in population. So one thing I do suggest if you are looking to move to Toronto is actually being aware of what areas you're going to move into, because that's what really matters, right? Like in the past, it didn't really matter. Honestly, you were safe everywhere, really, for the most part. But now you have to be more cautious about what areas you choose to live in. So that's something that you're definitely going to want help with. And if you are thinking about moving to Toronto, reach out. I will let you know what are the best neighborhoods to move into and so forth. All of our information is in the description box down below if you are interested. The last negative on this list is going to be the cold winter. So depending on where you're moving from, this may be a concern or it might not be a concern. If you're moving from different parts of Canada, if you're coming from another province, then this really isn't going to be a problem for you, especially because it is much colder in other parts of Canada. As you know, Toronto is in the border, so the south part of Canada, so it's actually a lot warmer here compared to other cities and towns in Canada. So if you're moving from another province, the likelihood is that the winters here are probably a lot better than where you're coming from. However, if you are a foreigner who's coming from a different country, then you might be really shocked by the cold winters. Now, mind you, I think a lot of people know that Canada has all 4 seasons and that it's known for being cold. So most people understand that. However, most people are really not aware that winters are quite long here and they can be quite cold. So they usually last between like 4 to 5 months. Now, again, it's been very dramatically different compared to when I was a kid. Growing up here, the winters were much colder, much longer, and much worse. It's actually a lot more mild now than it was in the past, but still, for foreigners, it might be a shock to them. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. Now, it doesn't mean that we're like hermits and we never leave. Obviously, it is way more active. Like the city is very alive in the summer, spring, fall, and it is more dead in the wintertime, but there is so much to do in the wintertime and there is a lot of winter activities. So it's not like you're going to be stuck in the house the whole time. Okay, so when it comes to Toronto, it is much better here to, do things and be out in the wintertime compared to other cities and, places in Canada where it's a lot more colder and people do kind of hibernate. But I feel like in Toronto, there's still a lot to do, so you don't have to worry about that. Of course, you are going to need some really good snow boots and a really good winter jacket, but if you have those things, you'll be fine. So those are the negatives of living in Toronto. Of course, with any place that you decide to live, there are going to be pros and cons. And depending on what you're looking for, this might be the right place for you or it might be the wrong place for you. And I hope this video helped you make that decision. Now, if you do really enjoy the big city, Toronto is a lovely city that is very alive and has so many great things. I do talk about the pros and cons in this video right here so that you can see what are the pros and the cons of living in Toronto. Now, if you are thinking about moving to Toronto because you are interested in moving to this beautiful city, then definitely hit me up. Me and my team are here to help. All of our information is in the description box down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, just check out this playlist right over here. Have an amazing day, guys. See you around the city, and God bless.